Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this panel discussion. I'm very glad to see you here. It's, as usual in the Middle East, it's always an important moment of time. There are always a lot of momenti, used or unused opportunities and occasions, and I'm particularly glad that our curator and moderator, Gudrun Harrer, good evening, will lead us to this, through this session this evening. I welcome Amr Hamzawy, Mr. Amr Hamzawy, and Mr. Oraib Al-Rantawi from here being on the panel, and both will be introduced in greater detail by Gudrun Harrer. I also welcome Amir Adly. Ahlan wa sahlan, ازيك. Thank you for joining us from Cairo online. Thank you. And unfortunately, Ms. Nadia al-Baghdadi, she's sick today, so unfortunately she herself, coming from the region, being an expert on the region, she cannot share her positions with us, but I think we try to make the best out of all of our knowledge for positions. So Egypt and Jordan in the light of the Gaza war, as you can see, we have experts with great insights into this, into these two countries, and of course the effects going much beyond. Also in the light of all the negotiations, in the light of the Arab states coming up with a kind of peace plan or way forward. So these will all be issues to be discussed today. Without further delay, I would like to wish you an interesting evening, followed of course by questions and answers. Again, welcome, sirs, and thank you, Gudrun.
Thank you.
I wish you a good evening.
Thank you very much. Colleagues and friends, good evening. Like the Pope once said, welcome to our discussion with my esteemed guests on the panel, whom I welcome warmly, and also our guest in Cairo. As Sabine already said, in these times, it has become really redundant to say such an event is timely, but it always is, but it is definitely today. I will limit myself to short introductions of my panelists in order to save every minute for our discussion and questions and whatever. All of them are distinguished scholars with impressive academic credentials. They have published important books, studies, and articles, and are sought after by media as experts. They know or even live in or have lived in the region they are talking about, and they know and they talk with the people living there. You can find more of them in our program here, only a few sentences. Sabine already told us, we apologize, Nadia al-Baghdadi is not with us for health reasons. We will really miss her because she's a historian of modern Islamic history, thought, literature, and culture, professor at the Central European University here, and I would have asked her to give us the broader kind of socio-cultural view and perspective of how did the Arab world wake up on the 7th of October 2023. How has it changed since then, and how realistic are the ambitions for a new start, a new political order for some and for the whole region? Is it utopia or realpolitik? But we still have our three important guests in alphabetical order. Amir Adly from and in Cairo. He's associate, I see him here, you see him here. He is associate professor in the Department of Political Science at the American University in Cairo, with international experience like Stanford University. Among many other things, he brings in our discussion the much needed expertise in political economy. a topic which tends to be neglected, even if Mr. Trump reminds us of it every day. The focus of his research and of his contribution today is on Egypt. Also, if he does lots on Turkey too, a very warm welcome to you. Amr Hamzawynand is a senior fellow and the director of the Carnegie Middle East program. Before that, he was professor at Cairo University and at the American University in Cairo, and he has a political past. He was member of the first elected Egyptian parliament after the revolution in 2011, and many other things like member of the Egyptian National Council for Human Rights. It's interesting because he lives between DC, Washington, DC, Cairo, and also Berlin. Thank you for taking the long way. And Oraib Al-Rantawi is the founder and director general of the Al-Quds Center for Political Studies in Amman. He's just coming from there for our discussion. A political scientist by training, he's a well-known columnist, writer, and analyst, also on television with his own show, I read. I didn't know that. I'm extremely grateful that he will be contributing a view from Jordan. Along with Egypt, it's the most exposed country to the implications of the Gaza war and possible consequences of an imposed solution which, once again, like often in history, could not take in account the reality, let alone the emotions in the region. When we started planning this panel, we knew that many things could happen until we meet, but the topic would remain the same. How do Arab states in general and Egypt and Jordan in particular tackle the impacts of the Gaza conflict? This cruel war is a catastrophe. The word is not even adequate for the residents of the Gaza Strip, but also could become an existential threat for neighboring states and political orders there. The impacts are economic, political, social, and add to pre-existing vulnerabilities in these states. The aim of our discussion is not only to describe the situation we are in, but also to focus on possible ways out. What is the path forward? What can be done? What could be Arab solutions? Also to counter proposals and even real intentions like displacing and even replacing the population of the Gaza Strip. It's not sufficient to deplore the ideas of others, you have to come up with your own. We will avoid to turn this into a Trump discussion, of course, but as we speak, we have to mention, as we speak, the US president is on his first day of his first official foreign visit, because, of course, Pope Francis' funeral in Rome was unscheduled. He starts in Saudi Arabia today and tomorrow, then goes to Qatar tomorrow, I think, and the United Arab Emirates on Thursday, and then we will see perhaps also Istanbul. The Egyptian Gaza plan, which was adopted by the Arab League in the beginning of March, and we will talk about it, calculated 53 billion US dollars for the reconstruction of Gaza. This is much money, but it seems also almost ridiculous compared with the hundreds of billions, in the Emirates case even a trillion, we talk about in terms of deals and investments when Trump goes to the Gulf. The region he visits is completely different from that of 2017, when he also made his first trip as a president to Saudi Arabia, and in that case also to Israel. At that time, the fate of the Palestinians was like eliminated from the political discourse, not only internationally, but also in the region itself. The total boycott of Qatar by Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt was imminent, and the Saudi relations to Iran were at the lowest, also to Turkey, by the way. Today, all these frictions have been repaired, at least on the surface, And also today you have a completely new Syria, and the so-called axis of resistance, including Hamas, is in shatters. Plans for an Israeli-Saudi normalization flew high until autumn 23, which also might have contributed to Hamas' decision to attack Israel. Trump still nourishes the ambition to include Saudi Arabia in the Abraham Accords with Israel, but he obviously also likes the idea of displacement of the Gaza population, and my modest assumption is that he cannot have both of it. But we want to hear our guests. I want to start with Oraib Al-Rantawi. I mentioned it, the impact of the Gaza conflict on Jordan is enormous. There are two sides of it. The deep connection of the Jordanians with the issue. The majority population, even the Queen, is from Palestinian background. But we cannot deny it, there's also a strong security issue for the state. The peace treaty with Israel from 1994 is not to be questioned, and the danger that the Palestinian suffering is exploited by radical forces, be it Sunni extremists, be it Iran, is real. So it's quite a dilemma. Please tell us more about it.
Thank you so much, and thanks for Bruno Kreisky Forum for this great opportunity to be in this distinguished panel and to meet this distinguished audience as well. To understand better the situation in Jordan, how Jordan is positioning itself, and what role is expected from this small country in the Middle East, I think we need to shed some light on the major constraints that are shaping the Jordanian position and role. And I will limit myself to 4 of them to save time for the rest of my contribution. The first one, from the Jordanian perspective, is Israel. Israel today is not the same Israel that we signed a peace treaty with it in mid-90s, 1994. Since then, Israel witnessed a serious systematic shifting toward far right. And by this, the Israeli top priorities is also keep changing. First of all, Jordan has no more influence in the Israeli political spectrum as it used to have. Under late King Hussein, with Rabin and Shimon Peres, at that time, business usually went in a proper way. But now there is a very lack of communication on the political level. They cannot talk with each other, simply like that. Netanyahu and King Abdullah II. From the Jordanian perspective in this field, the top priorities for Jordan is not respected by the Israelis anymore. And there is a desire among the coalition, the ruling coalition in Israel, to ignore totally the top national interest of this country. Jordan defined his top interest in the final status solution by creating a Palestinian viable independent state, which served as a defense wall for the Jordanian entity, with the far right coming to be a mainstream in Israel, not only among the ruling coalition, but also among the opposition. Now in Israel, we are talking about far right, both in the government and in the opposition, totally different to the situation in the 80s and 90s. We are facing a totally different story in Israel, which means the door will be open always for the far right projects, historically project, to solve the Palestinian problem outside Palestine, in Jordan, and on the expense of the Palestinian and Jordanian as well. The idea of having Jordanian as an alternative homeland for Palestinian and to resettle the Palestinian in Jordan is a nightmare for this country. It is not a result of October 7 and the aftermath war. We are watching these processes, these dynamics in the Israeli society for more than 2 decades now. The composition of the society is totally shifted. And now the far right is playing a hegemon role. The settlers' lobby is playing a hegemon role in Israel. 10% of the Jewish population of Israel, the settlers mean, but they are represented in the Knesset with more than 25%. And they have a serious influence on the rest of the political parties, including what so used to be classified as a leftist movement. Now they are a very minor group in the Knesset with a total member 10 seats out of 120, not more. The discourse of the parties, including the leftists, is totally changed, impacted by the increasing influence of the far right and the religious group in Israel. This means this is the end from the Jordanian perspective of what's so-called the two-state solution, watching what's going in the Westbank, in Jerusalem in particular, the increasing number of settlers and settlements there, sent a very alarming message to Amman during the war in Gaza, and with these ideas supported by the Americans to forcibly transfer Palestinians from Gaza to other countries, including Jordan and Egypt in particular. And what's going on in Northwest Bank now, Jenin turned to be a little Gaza. They are following the same policies they adopted in Gaza in Jenin. And there are more than 50,000 people forcibly transferred to other places or displaced in West Bank itself. When the Jordanians think that there is 700,000 of Palestinians in West Bank with the Jordanian documents, we believe that this is maybe the first wave of forcibly displaced people across the river. This is another nightmare for the Jordanian. Forget about what's so-called the Hashemite custodianship of Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is part of the religious, if I may say, legitimacy of the regime. It's not exist anymore. Settlers keep violating this shrine, holy shrine for Muslims, almost on a daily basis, with the government coverage and finance, totally different to what it used to be in the past. We used to see such violations in the past, but it was not formal, not funded by the government, no ministers, no MPs, member of Knesset, used to enter Al-Aqsa Mosque and practicing all these Jewish prayers, and this is totally against the understandings between the Jordanian governments, successive governments, and the Israeli governments as well. This is the reason why the peace process reached a serious standoff in the last 20 years. No progress, no meetings, no developments on this track. For Jordan, this is not only a threat to security and stability, it's an existential threat, which means that we may ended up with a Jordan that we don't know, not the same Jordan that we know since the year 1921. This will have a very serious direct impact on the Jordanian and in the Jordanian identity in particular. And this explains that this stereotype about Jordan opposition is mainly Palestinians and the regime can do nothing because there is a majority of Palestinians in Jordan. I think this is a stereotype. This is part of the past. Now, the hardcore of the opposition in Jordan is East Jordanian, not Palestinians. It's the tribes and the tribal community. And this is not totally new, but I can tell this is a phenomenon in the last 10 to 20 years turned to be turn to shape the whole domestic scene in the country. Why they are joining the street every day almost in October 7 and the aftermath, because they are defending themselves, their country, their identity, their entity. It's not only about solidarity with a brotherly people facing a genocide in Gaza. It's a self-defense. This is the feeling among almost all the Jordanians. If Palestine defeated today, Jordan will be next. You can hear this statement by the ordinary people in the street and the top of the decision-making institution. Jordanian united around this issue, but they are divided around the way to deal with it and to confront it in a way or another. Number two, the Palestinian arena. It is also create a lot of trouble for Jordan, since our only ally, not main ally in Palestine, is the BA, Abbas and his people. And they are collapsing, simply like that. The recent survey made a few days ago shows that 80% of the Palestinian people ask Abbas to resign immediately. And the influence of his party, Fatah group, is declining as well. After 19 months of war, 60,000 people lost their life in Gaza. The whole demolition of Gaza Strip, still Hamas have an influence among the public opinion more than Fatah group and the BA itself. If there is a free election, Khalid Mish'al will take 63 of Hamas, will take 63% of the votes against Abbas. Still Marwan Barghouthi, the leader in the Israeli jails, is the most strongest public figure in the Palestinian public opinion. That's why it's shaking. On the other hand, there is no channels open between Hamas and the regime. The regime in Amman refused all the calls from the public, from initiatives, to open up with all the stakeholders in the Palestinian arena. That's why I think there is a great deal of worries and concern about the growing influence of Hamas among the Palestinian people. And in a certain level, there is also a great deal of concern if Hamas took this image, victorious group in this struggle with Israel. This has a very serious impact in Jordan. And we can see the beginning of this phenomenon. Last September, we have elections, parliamentary elections, and there was a tsunami, Islamic tsunami in the elections, where they got 45% from the total votes devoted for the political parties. And this time, they proved that they are not a Palestinian stereotyped organization. It has a great influence among the tribes and the tribal community in particular. This was a very alarming message, the result of that election. Jordan fear from these consequences and the regional consequence of the war in Gaza and the aftermath, what happened in Syria. It's not October 7 now, which revived Muslim Brotherhood and political Islam in many Arab countries. But also it's December 8, when the Syrian toppled Assad regime, where the Salafist movement also gained a more momentum in the region. And with this coalition between Muslim brothers and Salafists in Syria, this is another alarming issue for Jordanian stability. For the USA, and this is the third constraint that we need to focus on. For the first time under Trump's first term, there was very strong message received in Amman in a very bad way. Means that the United States, the American administration, are very much tolerant to Israel, and they don't care that much about the Jordanian interest, and they deal with this interest, if ignored by the Israelis, as a collateral damage. We can live with it so far. The same message repeated under Biden administration, when Blinken in his first tour to the region come with to promote the transfer idea. Just 2 minutes to conclude. And that was an alarm. Now we are waiting tomorrow and the day after to see what is the new version of the deal of the century by Trump. He will declare this in Qatar or in Emirates, but mainly in Qatar as expected. The fourth constraint is the public, the domestic issues in Jordan. On the one hand, there is economic hardship, unprecedented one. On the other hand, increasing influence of Islamists in this country. The third issue, the increasing gap between the regime and the public, between the regime and the tribes as well. And 4 or 5 years ago, we have what's so-called the sedition issue, Prince Hamza and his issues. And this this was a very strong alarm. What is the options for Jordan? During the discussions in the last 5, 6 years in Jordan, there were 3 options. None of them is workable. The adaptation, to adapt ourselves to the outcome of the Israeli final status solution for the Palestinian cause. This is a nightmare. This is a recipe for a civil war in Jordan between this triangle, Hashemites, Jordanian, and Palestinian. It will be a mess. Confrontational option, which is not also on the table, since Jordan has no enough dependency to say yes or no, big no to the United States. We are, in a way or another, dependence on the United States, not only in financial aid, economic aid, but also for security and for political umbrella for the country. Wait to see, it's not an option anymore since the development increasing rapidly after October 7. Before that, that was the scenario. Wait to see. Things will change, maybe something emerged, and we can avoid going both in the adaptation or in the confrontation tracks. Now Jordan chose multilateralism because we don't have enough influence in the Palestinian arena, on the Israeli arena. We don't have enough money, and Trump's wisdom is to follow money. That's why he chose Saudi Arabia and the Gulf as a first stop in his new presidency. That's why I think we choose to work among a small group of our countries, mainly Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. Those are the strongest allies for Jordan in the Arab world, and this is what's so-called the contact, Arab Ministerial Committee that follow the Palestinian issue in general. I don't want to take more time, but I can tell it's not Jordan who has no power to change the track of the developments in the region. I think even the rest of the Arab countries fell short when it comes to the needs of Gaza Strip in particular. We have many summits, we have many initiatives, we keep talking about to stop killing in Gaza, stop genocide in Gaza, access to humanitarian aid, but at the end of the day, we have great ideas, but we don't yet have a political will to activate our tools, our cards. We have tools as Arabs, we have cards as Arab, but we lack of political will to activate those, to pressure Trump, to pressure the Israeli government to follow a different track. By this, I will stop here. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for taking more time.
Thank you so much. I mean, of course, I have a list of questions, and you confirmed to me what I also was feeling. I mean, there are so many political activities of Jordan politicians. For example, your Foreign Minister Safadi met Syrian and Turkish foreign ministers yesterday. And so many, but it's always the impression of kind of bystander, or, I mean, not passive role, but quite, not being an actor, no? So I come to Amir Adly because we will come to questions later. When we prepared this session, we agreed that you would start with the economic implications for Egypt. And you surprised me by telling me that you would not only talk about the damage, but also about opportunities. I mean, I found this extremely interesting because I thought perhaps I'm exaggerating when I spoke about the existential threat. I mean, you will elaborate now. I mean, perhaps Egypt is even, I mean, too big to fail and it gets more help than Jordan. So please tell us.
So thank you very much, Gudrun. Can you all hear me?
Yes, perfect.
So thank you very much for this kind invite. So yeah, I can pick the thread actually from the presentation before because I think that even though like the Egyptian like government has found the plan to displace the Palestinians or to forcefully transfer them out of the Gaza Strip also existentially threatening. Of course, it's an understatement to say that it is not as existentially threatening as it is to Jordan. Of course, many of the Arab states, and I would say the states more generally, like as a political project, has to do with population management. So definitely the forceful displacement of millions of people into neighboring countries, or even not into neighboring countries, is something that is more than enough to disrupt like an already extremely fragile region. And that's why I do think that Jordan, as well as Egypt, might not have the tools to push back themselves. But at the end of the day, they are political units that have been integrated, playing certain roles, serving certain functions in an overall region that is pretty much still subject to, I would say, not even neo-colonial interventions, but even classical colonial practices by the United States, which still sends its B-52s and its like destroyers and air carriers every now and then, actually becoming quite frequently, as well as, of course, the whole thing with Israel as a settler colonial project that is based on the dispossession and ultimately the dream or the hope or the ambition of the final solution given to the indigenous population by annihilating it or forcing it to go elsewhere. So overall, again, like most of these countries have played a certain role in an overall general function of managing their populations as well as others, like other populations within the region. And hence comes their functional importance. And I think that, ironically, this is their greatest asset. Of course, the problem is that you need to have someone who is rational on the other side in order to value these roles or to think of the consequences of pushing these countries to the brink, destabilizing the regimes or putting the state itself into in jeopardy, as is the case with Jordan. So the problem, of course, is that Trump, and I know that you are very keen on not shifting the focus into discussing Trump's foreign policy, which is like going to be like a topic of in its own right. The problem, of course, is that we tasted, of course, with Trump's first news conference with Netanyahu, we tasted the how unpredictable and how extreme the United States can be. I think that this is an indicator of a level of deinstitutionalization that the political system within the US has been undertaking for years now, and it has just been made very clear with the leadership style of Trump. But overall, it seems that the fate that awaits the Middle East is going to largely be shaped by the crisis that the United States is having, both internally as well as having to do with its role internationally. And that's why we have these very high levels of uncertainty. And the rules of the game changing, shifting, with already in a very uncertain region that has been like rife with so many conflicts and with so many sources of instability for many decades. Like, I think they have been quite endemic to the region. It's within this context, I think, that you have the bailout that took the guise of foreign direct investment, massive inflows. Of course, it did take the form of foreign direct investment. It did take the form of asset transfer, or we have no idea yet about the exact conditions of such transfer from the Egyptian government to like a UAE owned company. Yet, in essence, we understand, of course, that it was a bailout. It definitely had to do with a huge financing gap that Egypt was struggling to come up with in like back in 2023, in the following 3 or 4, actually 4 years. And that would have like put Egypt in a position close to default, especially meeting its foreign currency commitments. I don't want to go into these boring like technical details, macroeconomic or financial or whatever, but it's interesting that, of course, you have a consortium of actors that intervened. The United Arab Emirates, of course, played the most important role by injecting basically $24 billion in addition to the actual forgiving of, again, like that actual forgiving of an additional 11 billion, pushing this up to 35, which coincidentally, by pure coincidence, is the exact figure that the IMF was referring to as the financing gap for the following 4 years. It's not a coincidence, of course. But then you also have the EU, the World Bank, a host, the IMF itself, by the way, getting back in what seems pretty much as an internationally coordinated, even though they would completely deny that they were coordinating, but I think it was internationally coordinated. And this got us back to the idea that it was too much, given that context, given the context in which the region was following the October 7th and the Israeli war on Gaza that followed. It was like too destabilizing for so many actors to leave Egypt to suffer, even though, by the way, I think that there was almost, well, I would say a tendency, a very strong tendency among the GCC countries that do not act in coordination with each other, not to intervene in yet another bailout back in 2022. And that's why the Egyptian government was left, and the Egyptian economy was left actually in the hope of muddling through a suffocating crisis in 2022 and most of 2023. So I think that the overall context did serve eventually the yet another time vindicating the say that Egypt is too big to fail, and it would be too dangerous to destabilize Egypt at that point. So I think that this indicated, especially, like it renewed what could be seen as an overall commitment by some of the GCC actors. They keep shifting and they keep changing, but by some of the GCC actors' commitment to the stability of the country, the internal stability of Egypt. And I think that this eventually paid off. So yes, that did create an opportunity for the resumption of like older assumptions. Whether this will hold in the future or not, I have no idea. But I think that given what seems to be new influence that the GCC countries are bound to gain, and not because they were discovered as massive financial exporters or like exporters of capital at this very moment, but I think it has to do with the many blunders of the Trump administration in the past 3 months that exposed pretty much the significant erosion that the United States position politically as well as economically has undergone over decades. And like given the kind of tensions with the EU, with Japan, with definitely with the rivalry with China. I think that the traditional role of the GCC monarchies as huge exporters of capital to the core, to the United States, is going to assume or has already assumed bigger importance than it was usually assigned to it. And this is likely to, hopefully, I think, not necessarily knock some sense back into Trump. I have no idea what he has inside his brain, whether anything can be knocked back into it. I think that he is he's a genius when it comes to mobilizing people and getting elected. Other than that, he is an utter idiot. So the point is that I think that these are going to serve the forces of the status quo somehow. But a lot will be seen. And this gets me actually to Oraib's point, whether these cards will finally be played or not. It seems that the Gulf visit is so significant for Trump, for his internal dynamics primarily. I mean, like the whole thing with China having to back off from the plan of the tariffs, the ongoing failure to bring the Ukraine war into an end, the vulnerabilities that have been exposed even in the status of the dollar as a secure currency of international reserve, as well as the currency. Of course, the dollar is going to be there for a long time to come, most probably. But still, I mean, like it was shaken in a very abrupt manner, and all of these, I think, might eventually trickle down into bringing some element of like stabilization again to the region. This is at least what we have been sensing of the Trump discourse. Where this is going exactly, I don't know, but I hope that the Gaza transfer plan and whatever is being planned for the West Bank, by the way, are going to be shelved for now. That, of course, leaves us with the crazy people that are running Israel. And I don't know, like, can you reason with them? I don't think that anyone can reason with them. So it boils down to whether the United States is going to exercise some of some of its leverage on Israel or not. And this gets us back to to square one. A very unpredictable leadership, but apparently an extremely infiltrated leadership as well. I mean, like he seems to be like swayed by, I don't know, you give him a jet plane and then he is fine with lifting sanctions on Syria. You give him like a couple of hundreds of millions and then I don't know what he's going to be doing. That is a level, I think, of instability in like the decision making, especially when it comes to foreign policy. And like the Israelis, of course, are very much present inside US politics. So how this is going to play out, I have no idea. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was extremely interesting. I'm not sure if everybody here understands exactly about these investment plans of the GCC countries, which you call the internationally coordinated thing. I mean, are they, you said it was the financial gap in 23 which caused the intervention, I mean, just to do something. I mean, are they really working there? Is something happening there? It's about the development of a huge area on the Mediterranean, no? Port and so on. Are they, I mean, is it happening? Are they...
You mean the project itself? Well, the bailout did work eventually because Egypt did not default. Did it really lead to like recovery? No, the economy has so many like deep-seated structural and institutional problems, and unless these are, that would be like a completely different discussion, of course. Unless this is done, I'm not sure that this would lead. I think that the project will eventually deliver, meaning that this is what the Emiratis are good at, this is what they do. And I think that it will eventually deliver. Whether this will have the kind of impact in the future that would lead to a macroeconomic shift in Egypt's like chances for development, that's a completely different discussion.
Exactly.
I'm not convinced that it will. I'm not convinced it will. But anyway, I mean, like the economy was saved. For how many years? That's the bigger question.
Thank you very much. I mean, Amr Hamzawy, I looked for an excuse to invite you for a discussion, and the perfect occasion, of course, came when I saw your article you wrote in the beginning of March. No? The title was, the Arab States' Remarkable Moves to Push Peace in Gaza. I mean, we have to say, it's fair to mention that this was exactly between the first phase and the second phase of the ceasefire, I think. So, I mean, times were slightly brighter than they are now. No? You wrote about this summit, this Palestine summit in Cairo, which adopted the Egyptian plan, and you called it a sign for the collective political and diplomatic maturing among the Arab countries. No? However, you said also that the Arabs absolutely need to find partners in Israel and the United States for it. I mean, where are we now? How did it develop? How would you see it today?
Thank you so much, Gudrun. Let me start by expressing my gratitude to you, to Sabina, to Sophie, for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be back at the Bruno Kreisky Forum. It's a pleasure to be back in Wien. Let me also recognize the presence of two of my dear friends, two excellent legal interpreters, Muhammad and Muhammad Gadallah and Muhammad Farouk, German Arabic legal interpreters and language instructors. So we can easily shift to a German Arabic discussion with your help. So if anyone in the Q&A feels like posing questions in German or in Arabic, please go so. We'll depend on the two Muhammads in the back. Thank you so much for coming and for joining. Thank you guys for being around. Let me start by making a couple of observations, Gudrun, on your question regarding where the Arabs stand and the situation that has been unfolding in the Middle East since October 7, 2023. And I would like to focus on a couple of remarks. One, since October 7, 2023, the only collective voice for a peaceful settlement of any sort with regard to Palestine or with regard to the neighboring war scenes that emerged between October 2023 and today in Lebanon, in the Westbank, which is by no means less than what has been happening in Gaza in terms of the overall objective of pushing Palestinians out, or in Yemen or elsewhere. The only collective voice for peace has been an Arab voice, and this needs to be looked at. Mm-hmm. We're not in a phase which is comparable to maybe the 1990s, right after the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, pushing Iraq out of Kuwait, and the initiation of the collective peace process, the Madrid process that was followed by the Oslo agreements between the Palestinians and the Israelis, by the Wadi Araba agreement between Jordan and Israel back in the 1990s, and in the first decade of the new millennium, there were peace partners on both the Israeli and the US side. As of now, and I believe this really applies to the Trump administration because of the ambiguity it has been injecting in its foreign policy behavior so far, we know for sure that that Arabs do not have peace partners in Israel, and that it's extremely difficult to expect the US to be invested in brokering peace in the region. That's the first remark I would like to draw attention to. The second remark is it's also important to take note of the differences between Arab countries with regard to how they are impacted by the situation in the region since October 7, 2023. At the forefront Egypt and Jordan are impacted. I mean, I'm not a big fan of using the word existential threat lightly. And I believe, and I tease my Jordanian friends, Oraib included, that Egypt actually never faces an existential threat. I mean, Egypt has always been there, will always be there. We do not worry. We do not wake up worrying about Egypt being in existence or not. Unlike Jordan, where for different reasons, I mean, this is relatively a new country, 1920s, and have an extremely difficult social fabric due to different reasons which Oraib alluded to. But regardless of using the adjective existential, Egypt's and Jordan's national security concerns are extremely at stake. And it's not only related to forced displacement and to the craziness of the Israeli far right, and its plans for forcibly pushing Palestinians out of Gaza and the West Banks, or calling that forced displacement a voluntary displacement, which is now more in circulation in the last weeks. It's about displacement on the one hand. It's about actually engineering a situation in Gaza and the West Bank by means of creating a horrifying humanitarian condition that can no longer be endured by Palestinians, and this raises the specter of pressures on Egypt and Jordan. So forced displacement is one. The extremely dire humanitarian conditions on the ground are two. The impacts on the borders of Jordan and Egypt, in which, for relatively speaking, a long time, stability has reigned. I mean, right now, Jordanian borders with the West Banks are far from being stable. Egypt has a lot of fears with regard to its Israeli-Egyptian borderline as well. So Egypt and Jordan have different stakes. They see their national security concerns challenged. They see peace treaties that they signed with Israel, Egypt in the 1970s, Jordan in the 1990s, challenged as well because of lacking a peace partner in Israel. And the peace treaties are challenged because, in fact, each one of the two peace treaties stipulates the respect of national sovereignty and territorial integrity of the two countries involved in the signing. And this applies to Jordan and Egypt, and any push in the direction of displacement, collective displacement of Palestinians, would undermine the territorial integrity of Jordan and would challenge the territorial integrity of Egyptian territory as well. So they see the peace treaties challenged. However, the two countries have dealt with an extremely difficult situation in, to my mind, a diplomatically mature way. There were no provocations, there were no escalatory measures taken by Egypt or Jordan in spite of a difficult domestic situation, especially in Jordan. This is the first tier within the Arab countries which is composed of Jordan and Egypt, and primarily concerned about the fallout of the developing situation in Palestine. And you can sort of continue the argument and look at, is the two-state solution still viable? How would Egypt and how would Jordan respond to a scene in which the two-state solution is no longer viable? On what kind of options do we have? I mean, the two countries keep pushing diplomatically for recentering the two-state solution, but it's extremely difficult because they lack peace partners in Israel, and once again, because of the ambiguity of American positions. The second tier of Arab countries, which are engaged in different ways around the Palestine issue, is composed of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. These are three Gulf countries, and these are the three Gulf countries which Trump is visiting today, tomorrow, and the day after. And these are the countries with a big financial power, with a big diplomatic role that they have been playing in recent years. The most significant and key position is the Saudi position. And it's interesting to take note of the fact that the Saudis, since October 7, 2023, have conditioned any normalization talk two versions have been used in the discourse, in the official discourse of the Saudis. Have conditioned normalization with Israel or an extension of the Abrahamic Accords to Saudi Arabia and Israel, have conditioned it upon the creation of a Palestinian state or a viable path toward the establishment of the Palestinian state. Be it's the creation of a Palestinian state or a viable path, the Saudis have stopped all normalization pressures coming from the Biden administration, coming from the Trump administration, because they feel that they cannot sign a normalization deal without having at least a viable path toward a Palestinian state. And this is a corner position, a cornerstone in the Arab position vis-a-vis what's happening in the region. Qatar has always mediated, sometimes successfully, sometimes less successfully. Away from Qatari mediation, the UAE have played also a role in managing the situation around humanitarian issues in Gaza in the last 2 years and continues to be involved diplomatically. Taken together, both Jordanian and Egyptian positions as well as Gulf positions together stand for an Arab collective push for a settlement, one way or another. I believe that Arabs are, in a way, renewing the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, which was adopted by an Arab summit in Beirut in 2002, based on the principle of land for peace. Arab lands which were occupied in 1967, and the creation of a Palestinian state in return of normalization. I believe that Arabs collectively are moving back to the 2002 position, while in fact transcending the situation which was dominant in the region prior to 2023, in which the Palestinian issue was cancelled altogether. Back then, prior to October 7, 2023, there was no talk about conditioning normalization to a Palestinian state. Back then, there was no talk about land for peace. Back then, there was no talk about the two-state solution, apart from sort of Egyptians and Jordanians trying to recenter it. Right now, I believe that collectively speaking, Arabs are in a different place, and there is a clear push for renewing the grand offering, the grand peace offering, the Arab Peace Initiative 2.0, I keep saying. Third point, if Arabs lack peace partners in Israel and in the US currently because of the ambiguity of Trump's policies toward the Middle East. And by the way, I mean, as of now, the administration itself is not, the Trump administration itself is not well positioned to pursue a proactive policy in the Middle East. Most of the Near East, Middle East positions at the State Department are yet to be filled. It's actually the National Security Council which is running diplomatically the effort to shape a US policy toward key crises in the Middle East. We saw the US interfering militarily in Yemen in its campaign against the Houthis, resulting in an agreement of sorts after weeks of bombardment, the Houthis committing to no further attacks on vessels, military or commercial vessels. But it is the National Security Council which is leading the effort to shape US policies toward the Middle East. The State Department is yet to be well positioned to start that effort, and when you speak to American diplomats in the region, they will tell you that they are really conducting their business in a housekeeping manner. There is not much happening in US embassies in the region. So if we lack partners in Israel and in the US as of now, and away from the talk about deals which will be signed in the Gulf, because deals in the Gulf are important for the Gulf, they do not have to impact the wider regional security scene. It's important for Saudi Arabia to sign commercial and security deals with the US. The same goes for the UAE, and same happens for Qatar. Each country has huge bilateral interests with the US, and it does not have to be reflected in a changed security situation in the Middle East. Partners for Arabs are actually primarily the Europeans.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you.
Exactly. And here I come to the point of the fact we are looking at a different Europe. I mean, this is not only a different US, with Trump, it's a different Europe as well. And I'm not only referring to the rise of right-wing politics or populist politics in Europe, I'm referring to the fact that Europe seems to be less interested in the Middle East overall due to the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war, due to ongoing economic and social pressures, but overall, even in a place like Austria, a place which, historically speaking, has diplomatically cared about the Middle East, has tried to push forward some initiatives in the Middle East, it seems that there is not much energy coming out of European big countries or middle countries or small countries that have been traditionally interested in the Middle East. So whereas on paper, our partners in the peace, in renewing the Arab grant offering for peace, is on paper Europe, there is not much happening or coming out of Europe as of now, which is a dilemma. And it puts Arabs in the awkward position of searching for, excuse me, for alternative partners elsewhere. Sometimes there's a bit of coordination with China, sometimes there's a bit of coordination with the Russians. But it's a moment in time in which Arabs collectively are pushing for peace, lacking peaceful partners globally. Last and final point, once again reflecting on the reconstruction plan. And I believe it's interesting to keep in mind that it was a success, a diplomatic success, a collective diplomatic success, that the Egyptian reconstruction plan for Gaza was adopted in an Arab summit to become the Arab reconstruction plan. I believe it's a sign of effective Egyptian diplomacy, of mature Egyptian diplomacy, of the fact that Jordan sees its coordination with Egypt as key. Both countries see coordination with the Saudis and the Emiratis and Qataris are key as well. The fact that this document was pushed forward was a success, a diplomatic success. It changed the parameters of the discussion from a discussion around Rivieras in Gaza to a discussion about the cost of reconstruction, about the different phases and steps needed, all the way from rubble removal to getting mobile healthcare units, mobile housing units into Gaza Strip. It recenters the discussion around the West Bank as well, because what's happening in terms of structural violence in the West Bank is by no means less important than, or less significant, or less dangerous than what's happening in Gaza. And it all really comes back to one grand vision of the Israeli far right, which is basically to annihilate the Palestinian question altogether by pushing people around or locking them in small pieces of land. This is a discussion around reoccupying Gaza, around expanding settlers' activities in the West Bank, and so on and so forth. It was a success to put the document, an Arab document for the reconstruction, on the table and to have a discussion, a global discussion around it. However, the fact that and here are the structural constraints we're facing, the fact that we do not have peace partners in Israel, that the Israeli political scene is really about a contestation between different far-right voices and different far-right groups, and that the US is expected to remain ambiguous on whether it will commit to a peace push or not for some time, meant that the Arab reconstruction plan has not been shelved, but has been sidelined. There was supposed to, the plan was supposed to lead to an Arab Gaza summit, to a global Gaza summit, to get pledges, to raise funds. As you said, over $50 billion are needed, but the summit keeps being delayed for good reasons, because if you convene the summit right now, not much will happen in terms of pledges. Finally, very last point, I just would like to remind everyone of the fact that the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza has one actor responsible for it, which is Israel. There is enough humanitarian aid at the Egyptian-Gazan borders. Gaza has different entry points from different Israeli sides. The massive humanitarian aid that has been amassed in Egypt is in waiting since several weeks, since the end of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. And this is a question for the international awareness. This is a question for the international public opinion. This is a question for countries like Austria and other European countries that need to get active on demanding a change. This dire humanitarian situation cannot continue uncommented on, unobserved, undiscussed the way it has been throughout the last weeks. Thank you so much.
I should, for all of three, thank you for the three very important and interesting contributions. I should know, but I somehow lost track. Will the Arab Summit, Arab League Summit in Baghdad take place? Wasn't it planned? It will, but very, very soon, no? Wasn't it planned for May even?
Yes.
Yes.
And
yes.
Do you expect some movement there, some, I mean...
So, I mean, the Baghdad summit is going to be convened, I believe, according to the announced timetable. There was supposed to, the summit in Baghdad was supposed to be preceded by a Gaza reconstruction summit.
It was first...
a global summit, to which the Arab League was going to invite global powers to attend, key regional powers, key regional multilateral groups like the BRICS, for example, and others to attend. But the question is, to what extent is it useful to have a Gaza reconstruction summit if we do not know what kind of concrete pledges will be made? Because this would be a fatal sign. I mean, once again, you managed to recenter a bit the discussion around reconstruction, around the humanitarian situation with the Arab plan. This was pushed around because it was ignored by the Israelis. It was de facto ignored by the US administration as well. It's, I believe, well advised to wait before convening a Gaza reconstruction summit until the stars are aligned in a different way and until pledges, be it from the Europeans or elsewhere, can be committed so that the reconstruction plan can happen. And at the end of the day, if Israel continues to block the passage of humanitarian aid, we can sit around and get pledges and nothing will happen on the ground until Israel is pressured to open the borders and to let humanitarian aid in. People are dying. I mean, storage of food, medical supplies, whatever supplies are needed I mean, all reports which are coming are saying they are almost done. There is nothing left. And so we're risking a catastrophic situation even worse than what we've been seeing in the last 2 years.
By the way, Baghdad.
I also invite you, Amr, to intervene from Cairo. I want a conversation here now because we are late in the time, so we cannot make a regular second round. Please, Oraib.
I think Baghdad summit lost most of its momentum since it will come just a few months after Cairo summit, where almost everything is decided and discussed and agreed upon between the leaders. This is one. There is nothing much to discuss in Baghdad. It's already discussed in Cairo. This one. Secondly, it seems to me from Iraqi resources I met in Doha, where I come from to this meeting, that there will be a serious absence of many Arab major leaders on the summit for different reasons, security, political reasons, but at least many of the Arab leaders will not be there, and they will send some representative to talk on their behalf. This is for Baghdad summit. I have a small comment on the Arab returning back to the peace initiative 2002. I think what we saw recently is rephrasing to that initiative. Nobody talk or use the same wording of the initiative, which is mainly put an end for the occupation of the lands occupied June 67, and we will start a normalization process. Now, even the Arab summits, not in the Saudi or the Gulf discourse, it is replaced by saying that irreversible path to two-state solution without strict definitions and the priorities and sequence of, yes, Of course, there is no talks about refugees and right of return anymore in these talks. From my point of view, maybe we reach a point, we reached it before with the Israelis, even with the far right. They can say we can live with two-state solution. Benjamin Netanyahu in Bar Ilan speech 2009 under Obama pressure, he made it clear at that time. We are for a two-state solution. But what he means by two-state solution, he talk about one state and a half or less even. And now what we saw from this coalition and even from the opposition in Israel, the new approaches, nobody in Israel dare now to talk a Palestinian viable independent state. They can talk about autonomy, they can talk about cities league. This is a new project by the far right. You call it state, you call it empire, you call it, name it the way you like it. But the concept in the Arab Peace Initiative is not used anymore. And this is, from my point of view, is something alarming and worrying.
Amr, do you want to add something? No. No, I just wanted you to ask if you want to add something. No.
Yeah, no. Well, it depends. Like, do we have a couple of minutes, or you would like us to move to the Q&A session?
No, if you have a comment on what was said, please do.
Yes.
And then we move.
Yeah, it's just like picking the thread. I know that we should not be already commenting on each other's interventions, but I think that the GCC bilateral relations with the United States nowadays pass through many rearrangements within the region. So what is bilateral is on many occasions regional. We are already seeing this with the push for the lifting of sanctions on Syria. We have since 2011 many of the Gulf countries separately, but they have developed different geopolitical interests in the region, and that's why I think that overall we can talk about the rearrangement of the situation in the region given the new reality. So that's like one of the things that I wanted to clarify somehow. It does not necessarily contradict what Amr Hamzawy was saying, but it's just like about the redefinition of what is there, because we already hear the many of the Saudi analysts talking about Syria, about Lebanon, about Yemen as part of the deal that they would like to to strike with Trump. Talking about the future of a deal with Iran, how it would look like. So I think that the many failed states that were produced in the region over the past decade and some years have led to the de facto expansion of many of the interests. This is not the case anymore merely with having to do with internal regime stability or with armament deals. These are still there, but the scope has expanded mainly because the region is less stable and with so many points of void in the middle. So this is just like one thing that I wanted to clarify. I'll stop here if you wish us to move to the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I want to open the question and answer session. We are a little bit late in time, later than I wanted to be. I wanted to have a second round, and I have myself a list of questions, but I will be modest and giving you priority, of course.